We are talking about the basics of HTML and CSS. Why the basics? Because we are not here for the next 2 weeks, only for the next 1.5 hours. So there is just not enough time to make more than basics. But what I want you to show here is the concept of HTML and CSS and how it is meant to be used, which is fairly forgotten by a lot of people who are doing HTML and CSS every day. And I think some of the concepts are really genius, and it's a pity that we are not using it sometimes the way it should be, because it can make things easier. Nevertheless, I will talk a little bit and I will write a lot, and we are right away starting. And first, I'm introducing myself once again, shortly, briefly. My name is Marc Haunschild. I'm doing the second talk for Malt Academy, but I'm usually talking, consulting, teaching. I was writing 3 books about HTML, CSS, and accessibility. And yeah, if you want to see more about me, just Google my name. It's not very common. I think you will find me and not many other people. The recording, the things I'm talking will be recorded. It will be available at some video platform. I think it's YouTube. Yeah, okay. And also I will put the results of what we are doing on GitHub, so you can make a download or a clone later if you are interested in what we have done. It's nothing special, but it should be very pure and clear and clean and fine. So maybe this can be a starting point, or just for remembering things on trying yourself to play with it. Yeah, the table of contents is very small, just HTML and CSS. In a nutshell, it's just put here to give you a little bit structure in this talk, and everything else will be on the fly. So what I want to show you is, I would like to give you a little insight into my daily work, and you will see that I don't know everything, and I will look up things. And of course, it would be possible to make this small part I'm talking about. I could put things on a note here beside my monitor or something, but I especially did not, because actually I think it's a little bit intimidating if you are seeing experts talking all the time that don't need to do these things. But all the people who are here today and which are developer know that we all look up things all the time. And for the beginners, I want you to show, yes, this is the way we work. We don't know everything. We are looking up things. And when you're sitting in front of a computer, it's just one click away, the answer of nearly every question. So this is what we are going to do. And before starting, I would like to explain you the syntax of HTML. And actually, this is everything nearly everything you should know about HTML. It's as little as that. We have elements, and they look like this. Each element consists of an opening tag and a closing tag. The opening tag has the name of the element in it and another few, can I show it with my mouse? Another few letters here. I will tell you about this a little bit later. Important for me is to say here that the closing tag has these braces. It's the greater than and less than sign. It has the slash, which is indicating this is not an opening tag, but a closing tag, and it has the name of the element once again. Yes, let's have a little closer look to the opening tag. This is a little bit more complicated, because in the opening tag we have not only the name of the element, but we can have attributes. And if you have an attribute, you always have to put it into the opening tag. And an attribute can be, for example, the language. You can tell the browser that here is an element, and although the rest of the document is written in German, here is a part in English, for example. And this, this is a description for this whole element, and it ends when this element ends, when the browser sees the closing tag. This means he's switching back to the original language. The element's name is also part of the opening tag. I said this already. And let's come to the most important part of each element. Of course, the tags, the opening tag and the closing tag. These are only descriptions for the browser normally, but also for other software which is reading our page, so that the software knows here is a heading, here is normal content and list or whatever. But for the people we want to reach, of course, the content is the most important part, and not only everybody who is into search engine optimization knows the sentence content is the king. So here is where the magic is happening. So each element has an opening tag and closing tag and content. What you see here is a complete HTML element. There are empty elements, we will see them later, and I will tell you about this, but there's not a big difference, just the content and the closing tag is not there. We see this later. So what is an HTML element? HTML elements consist of an opening tag, a closing tag, and the content. The opening tag may contain additional attributes. They are optional. The closing tag is indicated by the slash. That's all you should know about the syntax of HTML. Just one more thing. The content can be text or it can be another element. And if you are putting a second element into the first one, you say you have a parent element and a child. Of course, the children also can have more elements inside themselves. And then you're talking about ascendants and descendants. There is no such thing like grandparent or grandmother or grandfather or something like this. It's only child or parent element. And if you are deeper in the hierarchy, it's about ascendants and descendants. Yeah, here you have an example how it looks like if you have one element, which is an outer element, and you have a child of it. This is the inner element. And here is one really important thing you should keep in mind, because this is not allowed. Never ever open one element, then open the next element, and then close the first element. As I told you, there are inner elements and outer elements, and the inner element must be closed always inside of the outer element. Okay. That's it. Let's start writing HTML. Yeah, I should move to the editor now. Let's see where I find it. Here it is. After telling you that things with an opening tag and a closing tag is everything you need to know, there's already the first exception, and this is the doc type. Every single HTML element, document starts with a doc type. And yeah, that is already everything you need to know about it, how to write it. There's nothing more into it. In earlier versions, you had to write the version you're using into it. But if you're writing it in this simple way, it just means this document is HTML, and we are using the newest version, the actual current now available version. So the browser knows how to render the page. Also, we are starting with the first element that every HTML document has. This includes all the other elements. This is the grandfather or grandmother from everything else, and you call it the root element because this is the root where everything starts. Also, each HTML document has two parts, an head and a foot, and sorry, this was the first mistake. Head and the body. Sorry for this. And these two parts contain different things. The head is all about description. Here we put things in that you will need to tell the browser so he can work with your document the way you want him to work with it. For example, you are writing here meta text. Meta is all about meta information. You're giving information about the document. For example, you are telling the browser the character set you're going to use. And I'm not going deeper into this. I'm just telling you at this place, the character set is a set of signs you are allowed to use. And the Unicode character sets include really a lot of them. And UTF-8 is the one which is normally used for all these things. And this is a little bit simplified, but I think it's enough here at this point. Actually, you're not using here a character set, but you're telling the browser which encoding you're using, but this is just the way you have to write it. Okay, so now you should be able to use Latin letters, Arabic, the most common Chinese letters, Cyrillic letters. So unlike earlier versions of or other character sets, you are allowed to use the most common signs from every language you know, I guess. This makes things much easier because you can go to a Russian or Arabic or whatever web page, just copy the text you find there and put it into your document, and the browser will render it correctly because he already loaded all the signs he needs for this. At the end, letters are just signs, little pictures which somebody was drawing. And into the body, we are putting all the things that will be on the actual web page. Let's start with the famous "Hello World" phrase. And this is the first thing we can already see on the web page, and I will give you a quick look at it. I'm switching the programs here into Chrome, and we see "Hello World" is written there. The letters are big because I was using heading, and the headings are rendered as big, bold text.
Marc, there was a question from the audience. Maziar, I'm sorry, I hope I pronounced it correctly, is asking which editor are you using?
Yeah, I was thinking about talking about it, and then I thought everything you see is not only coming from the editor, and I should maybe something say then about the plugins, but I will do this very briefly. If there is a question about it, I will tell you. This editor is called Brackets. It's from Adobe and it's free. And although it's from Adobe, not a lot of things they are doing are free, but this one is. You don't have to pay, you don't have to register, you can just download it. And what I like about it is it's very clean. You don't have a lot of buttons here, but anyway, you have all the features you need for writing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you're writing backend things with PHP, Java, I think there are better integrated development environments, but especially if you're working a lot with these languages, I like it very much because it's so clean. Also, it has something integrated which you are normally only getting with plugins, and this is this nice preview. I'm putting both things next to each other. I think I can do this closer. I'm so used to make things big when I'm teaching, because normally you have people sitting in the first row and in the last row, but now everybody's in the first row and everybody can take a closer look and just lean forward a little bit. So what's also really great, if I'm starting to write anything here, you see it immediately in the browser. And I think this is a really nice feature for teaching, because if there is such an immediate response, it's much easier to understand what's happening here, what I'm writing, if you see immediately how this results in the output. And yeah, saying this and reminding myself that I don't need this big letters here. I can put these things now next to each other. And thanks to these great questions, I think the further talk will be even better than I thought. Just one more thing, because this is something I guess most of you would like to have. I'm writing H1 and I'm pressing the tab key, and already the complete syntax is there. And this is not from brackets, but it's from Emmet. Emmet is a plugin that you can download also for free for really a lot of editors. So even if you don't use brackets, have a look at it. And there are so nice things like wrap with abbreviation. This means I'm writing the text first, then I select it. Of course, normally I'm using the short key, but I want to show you what I'm doing here. Wrap with abbreviation, and now here opens a line where I can put things in, and I'm writing now this H1, and now this text is in this H1 element, and this is really nice. It is a really big help if you're taking a big text from a Word document or from something. You just paste it here, and in every paragraph you're just selecting the paragraph and you're using the shortcut. And as you see, the last thing is already here, and this way you are very fast to structure this document correctly semantically. So this is a really great plugin for this and for other editors. And this is the main plugin for which you will see. Everything else, here you see some buttons. I can close it now. This is for GitHub, where we'll push things later, and for making new commits and so on. This is just that for giving you all the things we are doing here later on the GitHub repository. And last but not least, here's this nice thing. If I'm writing my document, normally the editor is already doing things. So this is looking beautiful. You see this like stairs or something, that everything is neatly intended. The indentation is made automatically by the editor, but if you're copying things from somewhere else, you may end up with this, which is not very beautiful and not very good to read. And you just click on this beautifier plugin, and here you go. So that's about the editor. It's brackets. You need a few plugins. Look into them. There are not so many plugins like for other editors. It's not very common, not very famous, but I like it a lot, and it's great for teaching because you will now see everything here immediately when I'm doing something on the left. Sometimes this breaks. I'm looking on this part and I will write, maybe I will not see this. So excuse me if I see this only a little bit later. Good, let's go on. So what we are doing here, next thing, and this is also Emmet, we need some content. And I can fill in things here like this, which means 5 paragraphs. P is for paragraph, 5 times. And into it, I want some lorem ipsum. And now we have this already. This is, I'm just using it because we need some things we can go on structuring. But I should maybe change to English here, but yeah, now it's German. I want to do one thing, and this is I don't want the lines to break. This is actually how I'm writing things. You see that this text is not important and we don't need to see the end of it. But yeah, now we have the first text here. This first talk, HTML, is all about structuring things, giving them meaning. And I was writing already my first 2 elements and not saying a lot about this. The syntax was very short, and everything else you need to know is, yeah, let's say vocabulary. Yeah, we have elements and we have attributes. And I was going on a little bit fast for showing you something so that we have some content here. Now let's have a look at the things I was doing. What this is for, I told you, this is that the browser can show all signs correctly, all letters. And we have the first attribute here. Like I told you before, the attribute has the name character set, car set, and each attribute has a value. And you see there is nothing like this here anymore. So we are starting with an exception here. Like I told you, there are a few empty elements in HTML. All the other things, I can click on it and the editor is showing you opening and closing tag all the time. And if I click here, there's no closing tag. Why is this so? Because in this opening tag, we gave already all the information we want to give. There's nothing more to say than please use UTF-8 encoding for understanding this document. And there is nothing I could write into this element. There are not a lot of them. Another one is this one, a break, which means a line break. It's the just showing. Let's write it behind the armed, that here the browser should break the line. That's all. And there's nothing I can tell about this which should be inside of this. Here's end of line and that's it. So there are really a few elements which are called empty elements. Everything else is like I said before. Head includes the description of the document. Body includes everything that we will see on the actual home page. And this part, which is white here, it's called the viewport. This is the viewport of the browser. This is where the magic happens. Yeah, and 2 more vocabularies. Head is for the heading of the first hierarchy. We have 6 of them. And this may sound a little, but I'm working in this business for no more than 20 years. And I never used more than 6. Normally you need 3, 4. I think once in my life I used the 6th one and twice the 5th hierarchy. And normally something is not thought through if you need this, I think. Normally, we will see this later, it's not necessary to have so many levels of headings. To make this homepage or this page look like an actual web page, we need some more things. Normally you have a heading area, and there is actually another element, especially for this. Don't confuse it. Here you have header and here you have a header, which means a part of the content which belongs into the body. And in this header, you normally write company name and you have a logo and things like this. And for a long time, people thought that this must be the first heading, the highest. And actually, you can do this. The most important things when you are thinking about a heading concept for your web page is that it must be understandable for people that you cannot explain it to. So if you have here the text and you say, I'm so important, my name is so important, my company is so important, this must be the first hierarchy of everything, then you may use the H1 for it, which results in the consequence that everything later should be H2 or lower, right? So once again, I'm doing this with this before I'm switching to using it with a short key. And I'm writing here an H1, and this means everything else is lower than H1 and should be H2. Don't change anything back. Oh, this is lost here. Sometimes I forget to hit the return button. If you don't, this won't stay there. If you don't like how it looks now, don't change anything. This is a job of CSS, and this is the idea of separation of concerns. We have another talk about this in the next week, but just for now, it's not the job of HTML to make things look like something or like anything. Don't use any element because the default style of the browser makes something with it. The most important thing, no, it's already wrong. The only thing what HTML is made for is to tell the browser which kind of text is here on the page. If it's a heading, then use the heading tag. If it is a paragraph, use the P element for this, and so on. And we will see later in the second part of this talk why this is important. So we have a header, we have a main part here already, and if it is the main part, we should call it like this. Once again, I'm selecting everything which should be in the next element, and this is main. So now our content has the body, has a header, it has a main area, and it's very common that it has also a footer for copyright and things like this. Just let's make it. Right now, I think not everybody is familiar with this and copy, and I don't want to talk about this a lot because you are allowed to just write this sign. I'm too lazy to look up how to write it with my keyboard. So I'm using this thing we saw before. It's called HTML entity. You can use these things and you see it's speaking more or less for themselves. If you're writing something that a string that is beginning with this ampersand and ends with a semicolon, the things between have some meaning for the browser, and if it's copy, it's the copyright sign. If you write something like this, it's the German yeah, A with 2 points on it. It's called A umlaut, and this is very helpful if you don't know how else to put things into it. That's enough for now, but everything should be in a container which gives meaning, and of course this is just a normal paragraph. Last but not least, most documents have sidebar, and now you should think about your concept. Is this part of the main area or not? This depends on what you are going to do with these things. I think quite often it is. It has additional information which are given to the main article. And if you think this is part of the main area, you put it inside or you put it outside. This is already about your individual concept, but it's important that you have a concept. And yeah, if this is part of the main, it's also part of this hello world. And if you're putting in another heading here, of course, it should be H3. Now we are on the next level of our hierarchy. Normally in this sidebars, and this is exactly what's written in the spec, you have additional information, further on information, something like this, which is somehow connected to the main article. And this is one more thing. If this is an article, once again, we have an element for this, then tell the browser this is an article. And it's very easy to read this. If you understand English, you have a header. What is it? This is the header of the content. You have main, of course, there's the main content. You have an article, you have something aside given to the article. I think everything is easy to understand, and there are not that much HTML elements. You can really learn this and learn what they are for. Just one little warning here. If you're saying, I want to put something on the side, this is not what you're using a site for it. A site has a meaning, and this means given to something which should be there. This is the main article, and you give this to the main article. But it's important to know that the article can stand on its own. You may take it and put it in a completely different context and it makes sense. And the aside depends on the article. If it's a completely in itself closed content and it does not need any other information, then it's another article and not an aside element. The same with the footer. The footer is not something which is on the bottom of the page. The footer is this element where you put information about your content. The copyright, who was making it, you can give an address or something like this here. So this is information about the content you're providing. And the same is with the header element. This is nothing which is on the top. Once again, here you have the things you're normally putting into it, you're always putting into this. And all the description in the specifications are about meaning. There's no HTML5 element at all which describes where something has to be or how it looks like. This is only the job of CSS. Okay, HTML ends already in 9 minutes, but we are more or less done. We have the main, we have a header, we have the main area, we have a footer, and every page normally, if it's on the web and if you have a site which has not only one page, also needs a navigation. Once again, there is an element for it. It's called the nav element. And navigation usually is a list of links. So if it's a list, we're losing an unordered list element normally, because the navigation normally has links in a very specific order. Normally, especially in big companies, they can talk about weeks or months about who has the first place in the main navigation. So there are ordered links, but the visitors of the website don't know why they are in this order. They are not alphabetically ordered, they are not temporarily ordered or something like this. So we are using an unordered list here. And just for putting in a few things, I will make it once again 5 times. And as a child, I'm using the link element. And here we go. This is something I could have done before. Now let's do it like this. And we have link 1. Could have done this with Emmet also, but it's not that, does not take that long time to make it by hand. 2, 3, 4, 5. So more or less, this is the structure you know from most websites. And I have a mistake here, because I was putting everything in just one list item, but we need a list item for every link. And once again, I can show you how fast we can change it with this wrap with abbreviation functionality. This is, I guess, the most frequent used feature of Emmet, at least for me. So now we have navigation, and before ending with the HTML, I will show you what I promised you, because I just can't remember these things. We need one more thing, and you just have to accept it. You're just doing it this way. I'm showing you because we need a tag here for responsive websites, which is telling the browser that no matter if the browser is on a very small gadget or on a very big gadget, that it should always use the whole viewport area for displaying the website. And yeah, how can I find it very fast? I think it's a good moment to show you what I like to use for making new projects. This is the HTML5 boilerplate, and you can download it, and you have a set of files, HTML in the index HTML, first CSS, and folders, and so on, which is very convenient for starting a new project. Of course, you can make your own, or if you're working with builders, they have these things already built in. Quite often they're using this HTML5 boilerplate, whatever. Here you can download it, and you have this thing I'm talking about until now, more or less already all integrated. Now I'm doing something. I'm looking at the source code, because I know they have this inside. Better use this one. Inspect it is in English, in German it's untersuchen. And now this is much more human friendly. We can have a look at the code, and it's not so messy like before. And we see a lot of things for describing this HTML element. And great, it was always there and now it isn't. I wanted to show you how fast it is to find things. Okay, I will put it in later. Maybe this is not even, here it is. I thought already they're not putting it in, and it's gone again. And I'm just copying it and edit as HTML element, everything selected, Command C for copying it, and we are done. And this I'm putting in here. So why I was showing you this thing. I told you already, not everything is in my head, and actually there are two things not in my head. The first thing is, if I need something really not often, normally I'm not remembering how I did it last time, so I have to look it up once again. And these things I need every time when I'm making a new page. So when I'm starting the next page, I'm just taking it from my last project. Now I don't have a project, I'm starting completely new, like I never have done HTML before in my life. So I'm taking somewhere from the web. But it's important to know where to take it. The source, of course, must be a good one. So I'm explaining you what's in here. You will have this later in this GitHub repository, and you just take it from there if you want to. This meta element has two attributes, and it could have 20, 100. I don't know if there's an how many it's allowed, if there is 256 or if there is no border at all, if you can use as many as you want. But of course you don't need many normally. The first one is name, and the information, the value is viewport. So you are putting in information for the browser about the viewport. And what is the content of this viewport information? It says the width of your web page should be the device width, should equal with this, which is important because if you're giving some layout information to the browser later in your CSS and you don't have this into it, the website may not use the complete space of the already small display of somebody's cell phone. So this is important that the whole available space is used. And the second thing here is initial scale is 1. So you can zoom, you can scale a web page, and you're starting without changing it. This makes sense. You could write into it that you don't allow zooming, but please never do this because for some people it's necessary to read text. They have low vision and they need to make things bigger. So please don't forbid to make this for them people because they won't read your content anymore. It's very important that you allow zooming for your users. Nobody will do it unless he needs it. So this is very important. And the last thing, every HTML document must have a title. Here I'm just saying this is the home page, and very often you have something like this then, and let's say something nicer. I hope there is no Oh, actually, there is something like this in Germany, at least. Ah, I just said, oh, let's say we're a pizza company, but actually there is something like this. So let's find Pizza Paolo. Okay, I hope this is okay. And I'm writing this the same here in the heading of in the header of the page. So what this is for, briefly, of course, you know, the company name is important and you should put it in the title, and you can see it in the browser here. So what we have done now, I will put it on next to each other once again. If I don't know, is it Zoom or why it's not allowed anymore? Ah, I know. Okay, sorry for this already. Here we are. So you can see the title here in the tab, but be aware that this is really important, because although this is so tiny here, maybe you think this is not important, it is maybe the most important text of the homepage, because the title is important for search engines to know what your page is all about. The title appears in many places. It will appear in the search engine result page. It will be shown in the overview of Windows on your desktop, and so on. You will find this title in really a lot of places. And now we have an HTML document with all the most common parts. There is a header, there is the main navigation, here's the main part with an article and additional information, and we have a footer. And I think this is something we can work now with CSS. Before starting with CSS, are there any questions about this we have done so far? Is this understandable for everybody? Is there anything you would like to know?
So far, there's no additional questions. There was one comment saying, great talk. I know HTML a bit, but I still was sure I learned some stuff from it, and I did a lot. And another comment from the same comment from an CEO perspective, it's actually not a good idea to have homepage in your title.
Yes, of course. This is just an example here. I would recommend on the homepage, let's do it like this. Actually, I wanted to show that this is looking here like you normally used to look at, but on the homepage, you're just writing the name of the company or of the site itself. If you have a site about how to make pizza, you should write there how to make pizza and nothing else. Also, it's quite common that the name of the page is on the front and the name of the company after it, because you don't have a lot of space here. I hope you can see it. I have now Zoom control elements here, because if you have open a lot of tabs, they're becoming smaller, and then you don't see this anymore. And it's normally more important for the user to know on which page I am. If it's about, let's say, pizza salami, they know that this is from the pizza company they are looking on it. On the next one is maybe the margarita, and on the next one, I don't know, fungi. And so they are opening several tabs to switch between them quickly, and they know from which sites they are and where they opened it. So it's important for the user to have the name of the page in the front, because the end is normally cut off.
Okay, thank you. Then there was a question from Florence, I hope I say this correctly, asking article versus section.
Yeah, that's a good question. Comes very often. A section has just less meaning. Article means that there is content which you can take like I said before, from the page, put it somewhere else and it makes sense. For example, rules of football. And you're reading it and you understand it, and there can be some more information aside. For example, in detail what the referee is doing or things like this. But if you take the rules of football, you can just take it without navigation, without the header, without the footer, and you can give it to somebody and he will understand the rules of football because everything important is in this part. A section you need for further structuring your document. For example, your article about football rules can have rules about the red card, the yellow card, and other things, and you put them in chapters, but there's nothing like chapter in HTML, so you would use sections for these things. And also you can use it for grouping articles. For example, if you have a news portal, you could have a section for sport and have all the sport articles into the section. It just has less meaning, and so you can use it more free for grouping things. These things can be inside of an article, and a section can also have a lot of articles in itself.
There's another question just came in. Can we have a list without the bullet points?
Yes, this is CSS and we are going to do this. Of course, this is not what a navigation bar is looking like. We are making it horizontal and we are removing the bullet points.
Perfect, and maybe that's the perfect way of jumping in.
Yeah, I think so.
CSS, but there was another comment. The smaller thing is where quickly explaining web icon would be nice for people to know this. I forgot how it's called, but the point icon.
Yeah, this is the fav icon. If you call it like this and you just throw it in the root directory of your site, and the browser will find it and use it. This is the thing you can see here. This symbol of the world will be replaced by your own icon. And if you put it in the directory structure right here, let's have a look at this briefly. This is my whole project, and in this project is not only the page itself, but we have assets. There are there's a picture, and then we have the page itself. And because I'm putting the things into GitHub, I have a README markdown file where there is a short description. I can open this. These are the things you will see when you're opening the GitHub page. And yeah, there's just one sentence here. You find the source code from the live recording. So the actual page is just in here. And from our page, this live coding result directory is the root directory. This is the thing which is going on the web server later. And here where there is the CSS folder and the index HTML file, here you should also put your fav icon. And then the browser will take it. Or let's say the server is delivering it to the browser. This is more the way how it's work. Okay. Great. So let's jump back to the presentation, because like I said some things before writing HTML about the HTML syntax. Now it's about the CSS syntax, and it is even less complicated. Everybody thinks CSS is complicated, but it's not. Just don't want to know everything in the first second. If you're going step by step, then everything will be good. This is an CSS rule. And a CSS rule can have one or more properties. It all starts with the selector because you want to select, for example, all the headings in your web page. So you must tell the browser what kind of element you want to style. Then you have a property which can be, for example, background color, and a value which can be red, yellow, green, whatever you like to have as a background color. And you can have a few of them. In this example, we have two declarations, and they together build the declaration block. Every rule has only one declaration block. There are not more. And the rule consists of a selector, and the declaration block is always in these curly braces. If you have more than one declaration, you must separate them so the browser knows that there is not only one property and value, but more of them. And the browser does not care about line breaks. He needs the semicolon to understand the first property ended. Here, the next one starts. So actually, you don't need the last semicolon, but I always recommend to write it always so that you become used to it and you don't forget it. Because if you don't forget it, your CSS will be broken. And especially for beginners, this can take you hours to find the semicolon which is not there and which you're not used to use all the time. So I highly recommend you please end every declaration you're writing with a semicolon, even then when it's not necessary, because there is not another declaration following the first one. So what is the CSS rule? First, short summary, like I made for the HTML element. It depends. It consists of a selector, the declaration block in curly braces, and the declaration has two parts: a property and a value. They are separated from each other by a colon. Also important, so the browser knows where's the property, where's the value. And two or more declarations must be separated from each other by a semicolon. And now, friendly note to myself, time to switch to the editor. So let's write CSS. I was preparing not a lot for this talk because I want to show you every single step how I'm making web pages, but here I was already putting in an empty main CSS and an empty index HTML because I think you know how to make a new file. Just for everybody who doesn't, Datei neu, or in English file new, this is where you can make a new one. So let's start by something big. I want to change the color of the body. I give it a new background color, and let's make it not so too disturbing for the eyes, and I'm already done. Background color aqua. This is a really beautiful color. I think we can leave it like this because nobody sees it. This is not the sense of writing CSS, that nothing happens. So something is missing. Actually, I can promise you this rule is correct. Everything is nice here, but the browser does not know about this file at all. So we must connect our HTML file with the CSS file. And this also comes into the head area. And for this, we have the link element. We are linking our HTML document with the CSS file now. And we need a hyperreference. We are referencing to our CSS file. It's very convenient in the brackets and in many other editors also that he knows about directory structure. So he is asking us already if we want to go into the CSS folder or we want to link to the index HTML. Of course, we're going into the CSS folder and we're choosing the main CSS file. And yeah, actually, it should work already. You can give more information about this, but as much as I know, I would like to read about it. Here's one thing I cannot say for sure. I think this is enough. Everything else you could write there, which you could put into this link to the CSS is anyway the default. You can write type is text CSS. This is what you see very often, but as far as I know, this is not necessary. No, one thing we really do need, and this is we have to tell the browser in which relationship this linked file, how it is related to our HTML document, and it's the style sheet. And now it works. So I'm making the editor big so that you can see the whole line, because here it's important to see everything. What we are doing is we are linking our HTML element to an CSS file, and we're telling the browser in which relationship this HTML element stands to the main CSS. And it's a style sheet. So that's about this. And it's working. I will remove this rule because I think everybody agrees that this is normally not what you want. The problem is, even if I'm looking for other things here, all the colors that do have names, I think it's 256, which of course is not an accident, but this is not really a lot. And normally you're getting, if you're working together with a designer, you're not getting these colors. And we have different possibilities to write colors in CSS. I think the most friendly for most people, which you are already used to, is to write the colors in red, green, and blue RGB. I think the most people have seen this already, and you can make something like this. The first number is about the red part of it, red, green, and blue. So the next is for green and the last is for blue. And if I'm putting in a lot of red, 255, 0, 0 green and 0 blue, we have a red background. This is completely the same like writing red. When you're working, if you're working with a program like Photoshop, when you're working with other designers, very often you're getting hexa, the numbers in hexadecimal version, and you will end up with something like this. And once again, we have red, and I want to briefly explain this. This is more or less the same, but the FF stands for 255, and the two zeros stand for nothing and nothing again, and so you end up with this. To let the browser now know that you are using a hexadecimal value, you have to write this gutter in front of it, and it tells the browser now comes in just another way to write the same color. And what's really interesting, and I want to show you also, this is RGBA. There's more HSL, and so I don't want to, and I don't have the time to explain everything. But this thing here is also very nice because it allows you to say that the background is partially transparent. So with this 0.5, or let's write it 0.5, it's maybe easier to understand, which is the same. You can tell the browser that this background is red once again, but only 50% is the opacity. If you want to have less opacity, then you make the number smaller. If you want to have more, you make it bigger. And this is, of course, especially nice if the background of the body has a picture or something behind it. And you can use it, for example, to make it very dark. And if you have white text, or let's make it, I was too lazy to write it, we will make it quite bright. 200, but it becomes clearer what I want to show you. Now I have quite bright background, and if I have a picture behind it and the picture has dark parts in it, then I can still see the picture, but because I was giving this quite bright color here, the picture should never be so dark that I cannot read my black text on it anymore. This is of course important. Readability is the essence of everything. If the people are coming to your website and they cannot read what you're putting on it, yeah, you're lost, and the people also. So this is a really nice way to have some kind of structure or something on the background, and you can see through another element which is closer to the user. All right. Why I was talking about background colors and the color itself so much, because I want to make these things which we are going to put on the left, on the right, on the top, on the bottom, visible. So I'm putting for all the elements in our, I will give all the elements that we have in the body, which is header, nav, main, and footer. I will give them now a color so we can see them. And especially I want to see the dimensions, how big and how wide they are. So now we see the background. This is this gray part. We have a header. Once again, I'm selecting. Header is the selector. And in the curly braces, I'm writing my property. The property once again is background color. And this won't be very beautiful, but it will be very clear what I'm doing. And it will not be accessible. Everything we are doing is accessible except of these colors. I'm using colors which have not enough contrast maybe. But on the other hand, it's accessible again because I want not the text be readable now. I want you to see the different containers. And now we can fasten up things a little bit. I'm selecting it and copying and pasting it. And so I can make the main area, for example, yellow. I don't have to write all these things again and again. And we have a footer. And I forgot one thing. And this is the nav. Let's say this one is white again. So I guess 4 parts, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we have now everything which is in the body now has a color, and we can see clearly which is what. So the first thing I was already promising, we are changing the navigation. No navigation bar normally is like this. They always are horizontal and they don't have this dots in front of it. So if we want to select a list, we could use only UL, which is the element, but this would cause a problem, because if I'm writing just UL, this would be for every list. And we don't want that the list in the articles will change how they are looking like. They should still look like this. Only in the navigation area, they should be different. So I'm writing this. This is a combination of two selectors, which means every unordered list, which is a descendant of the navigation, should look like the things I'm writing here. And the property for changing the list style is actually list style or list style type. And in this particular case, there is no difference between list style and list style type. List style type is just a little bit more, let's forget about the details. But this is how we remove the dots. Of course, there are more possible values, and the editor is showing them. You can use circle, disk, and much more things, but we don't want to have any, so we're writing none. And now we have a thing which is not in the specification, because we have an indentation here. This is not completely on the left, and there is place between the links and the beginning of the nav area. And if I'm clicking on it and I'm going to inspect element, or untersuchen in German, we can see that this element this is also too big. Here you can see it. This is how this element looks like, and it has a padding on the left. If I'm going with my mouse over the element, you can see on the actual page that the padding is this yellow thing next to all the links, and we must remove it. And the problem is, normally we can see all the styles we are using, but actually this is empty. What's down here is the user agent style sheet. So here we can see what the user agent, which means the browser, Chrome, is giving us. And here are 40 pixels that we want to get rid of. So we are putting our own padding on this place. We override the user agent styles. Padding left. And I want that you can see it immediately. So I'm putting this here again. Padding left is 0, nothing. Okay, and it's gone. So one more thing. Oh, this is really short until 1 o'clock. But no problem. The next thing, there are really a lot of techniques for putting the things next to each other. But I think the most convenient thing is to tell the list that it should become a flex container. And already they are standing next to each other. And a flex container, if you are establishing a flex container, it means that all the children of the container are becoming immediately flex items. And this is about how to show things, how to display them. This is a command to the browser. Don't display it any longer as a list, but as a flex container. And then the items in it are not longer list items. They are list items actually, but you show them as flex items. And now you could go into the list items and give them a lot of additional styling. I just would like to make one little thing here because they are sticking together and I think nobody wants it. And we have two we are putting a margin on the left. This is outside of the element. The padding is inside of the element. The margin is outside, and let's say 10 pixel. And we can put the same on the right, which is here, and now they are not touching each other anymore. Of course, you can imagine if you're giving them another color for the A element, and if you're giving the A element another background, they are already nearly looking like buttons. I'm not doing this because I want to show you some other cool technique, and this is CSS Grid. We have only about 10 minutes left, and the good thing is, although everybody thinks Grid is really complicated, and this is the main thing I want to show you in this talk. Yes, CSS Grid and all these things are complicated, but they are not complicated because they are difficult to use. They are complicated if you don't know a lot of things about it. And if you want to make, from the very beginning, a very complex website with a really detailed layout, this will be just a lot to know. But don't try to get everything in your head at once. Make it step by step, and we are starting here with something small, and you will see that I have to look up things, and this is completely okay. And I will show you where to find things. So we have a body, and we want to place things on the body. You all know Bootstrap and all these frameworks which are promising to make it very simple. And they are all working with the same idea. You have a grid system with normally 12 columns, and you're placing items on it. And for doing so, that you have to handle a lot of classes and write into the HTML about how much columns you want them to span, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or all the 12, or yeah, how they should change their behavior on small screens, on mid-sized screens, and so on. And with CSS Grid, we are going like this. We are saying the body will be our grid. And once again, we are using the display property for this. And this time the value will be not flex, but grid. And the same thing happens like before with the flex property, because when we are giving a container, and now it's very important to look into the HTML for one moment. This is the grid container. When we are making body to a grid container, all the children, which are header, nav, main, and footer, all the children are becoming grid items. And you already see that they are looking different and placed a little bit different. So now we have to do what Bootstrap is giving us for free, but we are much more free in what we want to have, because we can now say how many columns we want to have. We are defining our own grid template. And for doing so, there is a unit in CSS called fraction. You write it FR. And this just means a part of the width, nothing more. And if you're putting in 2 columns and both are 1 fraction wide, this just means that you're establishing a grid, and every line in the grid has 2 columns, and they have both the same width. One question?
No comments from the audience.
Okay.
We have like a very enthusiastic guest, and that's
Great.
amazing. So, thank you.
So we already have our grid, yeah, and this is exactly that easy. And if you want to have 12 columns and they have all the same width, which is all what Bootstrap is offering you, you just write 12 times one fraction here and you're done. For our web page, we are now working we're making one simple page. We are having the header in the top, then we will have the main area and the navigation in 2 columns, and we have the footer in the bottom because we don't have more time. But this principle, it's the same principle for more columns. But actually, normally you don't even need 12 columns. But let's start with this. The next thing is, although they are everything is now on our grid, of course, this is not the way we want to look at. So we must tell the items which are on the grid. In this example, the first thing is the header, where we want it to start and where we want it to end, like we do in Bootstrap also. So we can place this item on the grid columns that we already defined here for the container. In the header should start at 0 and end at, yeah, let's write it like this so I can explain, because this is.
Marc, may I interrupt you?
Yes, of course.
There are questions, and please, I will ask the audience to put in, send the question to all panelists and all attendees, so also our viewers can see the question. There's a comment or question. When I started developing simple pages, I was told not to write HTML by hand, but use some tools to generate that. As a professional developer, when would you use a tool and when would you write HTML code yourself?
Yeah. Actually, I would like to say, if you're a professional, then you should write it by hand, because you should know how to do this, and it's always cleaner and better. The problem is, if you're doing so it can end up with a lot of work, and I think everybody must find his own way how to do these things. If you're working in an agency and you're building up your own toolbox, you can write HTML by hand, but the people who are making the programming, which are using PHP or Java or whatever, will work always with templates, and they can reuse these templates. And if the HTML is made by hand, you have the complete control over it, and you cannot work without reusable code. But I think, and well, it's possible, and I'm doing this, when you're working together good with programmers, and we have people who are typo 3 integrators, PHP developers, Java developers, it's possible to build up your own toolbox, and that you're not depending on ready-to-use things. But yeah, this I cannot tell somebody how he has to work, but the cleanest, the best results you're getting if you're doing this by hand.
The person at the question says, but it's
more expensive, maybe.
Okay. So then we have another comment. Gunnar tends to agree with you when it comes to grid. He says it's not complicated, at least not for beginners. It might seem complicated for developers with some experience though, and shared a link. Please, Gunnar, be so kind and share it again so everybody can see it when you select all panelists and all attendees. Thank you very much. And then we have another question. I'm a designer and worked on some HTML emails. The files I received from the agency have all the styling done within the body of the HTML file. Would it be better to have them in a separate CSS file, or does it work differently for emails than for websites?
Yeah, emails is a really, really big problem because you don't have just 2 or 3 rendering engines. The browser market is very small, although maybe it does not look like this, but we have only the Blink rendering engine in Chrome, and we have another one in Firefox, and I think that's all right now. It's called Gecko in Firefox, and we had others like Presto and Internet Explorer, and Edge had its own, and Opera had its own, but they are all using the Chrome rendering engine now, except Firefox. So it's, and both the Gecko from Firefox and the Blink from Chrome are good. They are using, they are doing what you're writing in the way the specification specifies it. But in email clients, you have a much more variety. And for example, if I don't know if it's still like this, but for example, Outlook uses Word to render the HTML you are using. So this becomes really complicated, and it's working completely different. And you can, let's put it this way. This is something completely different, and I'm not talking about this here, and this would be too far, okay? But it's not working like making a homepage. Styling HTML emails, it's really something completely different, which is really difficult to, in terms of testing and so on.
Okay, there was another question. Could you say some words on problems which might occur when the HTML CSS is displayed on different browsers and different versions of the browsers?
Yeah, actually, there is not a lot anymore because all the browsers are using the Blink engine except of Firefox, and he is also respecting the specification, so it should work everywhere more or less the same. There are little differences, that's right, and of course in different versions and earlier versions things might not work or might work different. For this, the only reasonable approach, in my opinion, is live with the fact that older browsers have less possibilities than new, which means when you're starting a project, the best way is to make it exactly like I showed you. First, begin with the HTML. Make this HTML meaningful, and then you have already a result. Just have a look at this. If I'm removing the CSS or making a mistake into it, this works. And there are even websites which look like this. And everybody can visit them, everybody can use them. You can change the size of everything, you can adapt it to your own needs, and there will never text outside of the viewport. You can reach everything, you can use everything. So this is the first thing you should start with, and then build on it step by step, make things better for newer browsers. This approach is called progressive enhancement. And for example, if a person has an old browser that does not support CSS Grid, you have all the other styling and the things are just standing one on top of the other and not next to each other. This is the only difference. And I think everybody who has an old browser and is used to completely broken websites can completely live with this. And on the other hand, working around the things that old browsers cannot do and make it look closely or the same like in new browsers will need a lot of effort, and this time you should better put somewhere else. And then it's not so expensive anymore to make it by hand.
Thank you. Comes from the audience. And then did I see another question? If I have a container with a picture on the left and a text on the right, is there a command that tells the text to be centered on the picture?
On one side the picture, on the other side this. Okay, if the text is shorter, not so high like the picture, I think this is the question. Yes, if you're using Flexbox or Grid, you have the possibility to center things vertically in this. So here, the modern possibilities are making things much easier, because for a very long time it was very difficult. But with Flexbox, for example, it's just center, I guess. Center for vertical, not vertical line, not this is for alignment in the line. I have to look it up, but I will show you where, and I think this is really good for the people watching here to know where it is. There is a page from CSS Tricks. It's called Complete Flexbox Guide. So Complete Flexbox Guide. And the nice thing about it, here you have all the commands together, which are which you need for working with Flexbox, and you can see there are two possibilities to arrange things with Flexbox. You can tell the browser what the container what should happen with all the items inside. This is justify content, and align items. And you can tell one single item that it should behave other like all the others. And which things you need, you can find all in this complete guide to Flexbox. Just use it, use a search engine. It must not be, has to be Google, can be any other, and will be one of the first results, this article on CSS Tricks, which is really nice for looking things up about Flexbox. And I think I would make this Flexbox if I could understand the question.
Okay, thank you very much. There's another question. If you could say a few words on Bootstrap, about Bootstrap.
Will be part of the next talk. And I will say there's not enough time today, I guess. And this anyway will be a topic of the next talk.
So please join us for the next week's talk, same time, next Thursday.
By the way,
Perfect.
I would also ask the audience for something. If you have further questions, it's really nice to have your feedback, and maybe we'll make a talk about something that you're writing now.
Question, are you on Twitter?
Yes, I am Marc_Haunschild, I guess.
Marc_Haunschild, perfect. And do you finish the CSS part in the Git repository?
Yes, I will. I will make this. There's not a lot left, but I will. I think it was more important to answer the questions now, and you will get the final result. I have a syntax error here that I have to look up, and I will fix this. We are nearly done.
Okay. Would you like to finish? Should I start with the closing words, or would
yes,
you like to?
Would like to finish with just a few recommendations for further learning. And especially for grid, there is really great collection of examples. It's called CSS Grid by Example. It's from Rachel Andrew. Really, really helpful. So if you have no idea what to do, if you know how to write it, if you know what you want to do, you can look at the picture, how you can arrange things, and then you click on it and you will get the code for it. This is really nice approach. So you know already where you want to go to, but don't know how to go there. So have a look at the CSS grids. Then I would like to recommend you, for the people who are doing Flexbox for the first time, have a look at CSS Flex Froggy. This is a little game where you have to write code to put little frogs on flowers. Really nice. It's fun. And after finishing it, you know a lot about positioning with Flexbox, and of course, how to put text next to image or wherever you want to do. And I think this is the most important. And else, have a look on YouTube on the I think you know this normally where you're looking things up. Normally the sources where you're on, normally you can use them too for finding things like this.